Chair now recognizes the ranking member of the full committee, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, I wanted to ask the administrator about the Superfund program, which is so important to my home state of New Jersey. But again, by way of background, because I hear what the Republicans are saying, look, nobody likes regulation, nobody likes taxes, but part of the reason why we have a Superfund is because there wasn't proper regulation years ago, and companies did whatever they wanted and threw Agent Orange and all kinds of pollutants on the ground and in the water, and so we got to clean it up. And that takes money, and that's one of the reasons that I was in favor of reinstating the Superfund tax, which lapsed in '95, and worked to reinstate this, what I call polluter pays tax ever since, because I don't think taxpayers should have to foot the bill to clean up these toxic waste sites. That responsibility should fall to the polluters who created the problem in the first place. And so thankfully, we reinstated the Superfund tax last Congress through a combination of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. So I wanted to ask you, how has the dedicated funding stream created by the Superfund tax reinstatement helped to speed up or increase the number of cleanups started by the EPA?
Well, thank you so much, Congressman Pallone, for your support of Superfund and the Superfund tax. We've seen an exponential increase in speed. In some communities, we've seen calendars move forward by a year. In 2022, we obligated about $1 billion in bill funding at 116 Superfund sites. And you know, we're using that bill funding to clear the backlog of 49 sites that were previously unfunded and did not have any construction occurring. So this is a significant shot in the arm in communities all across the country who are living in these blighted areas.
Well, thanks. Now, the funds provided by the tax obviously are helpful, but they do not cover every need of the Superfund program. So to that end, the budget requested an additional $355 million. So could you talk about those additional funds and why they are critical for the Superfund program?
They're very critical. You know, we're grateful for the leadership of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the billions of dollars from bill, but there's a gap. There's a deficit for a lot of communities, and you and I have been to some of these communities, and you understand that the impact on these communities is not only a health impact, but there's an economic impact. There's a psychological impact from living close to these blighted sites. And so this $355 million is really going to help communities all across the country.
Well, thanks. Now, the administration has also put a spotlight on environmental justice through its Justice 40 initiative, and that was championed by my late friend and colleague from this committee, Representative McEachin. So can you tell us, share how the Superfund and brownfields programs factor into Justice 40 and how the budget furthers the administration's Justice 40 initiative more broadly?
Well, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, the majority of these brownfield sites and Superfund sites are in low-income communities and communities of color or near tribal communities. And so as we've allocated this funding towards those who need it the most, we have met and exceeded the Justice 40 initiative, which is at least 40% of these federal dollars be invested in communities, and you see the benefits in those communities. We're very proud. In the first year of the Superfund program, I believe we were in the high 60% of those resources were going to underserved communities. And again, that's low income and communities of color. This is very important. It's very important that we have that Justice 40 floor, but in many instances, our programs far exceed that.
And I appreciate, you know, I think it's important that we talk about not just Superfund, but brownfields, right? Because there are so many more brownfield sites than there are Superfund sites. And although they may not be as dangerous because they're not on the national priority list or not as toxic per se, there are many of them. And so I do think that we need funding to help clean those up. It can't just be all borne by the state, otherwise it's not going to happen. But again, I'll just conclude by this, Mr. Chairman, which is, you know, the budget cuts and rollbacks that are included in the Default on America Act, you know, the one that the Republicans passed just before the last break, you know, to address, in their minds, the deficit, is really going to hurt a lot of this cleanup, and the funding cuts will really make it much harder for you to meet your health and safety goals. So I understand that they've expressed concern about how you're going about things, but the bottom line is if you have a lot of cuts from their default act, you're not going to be able to do a lot of the things that are so important for people's public health and safety. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired.